Nancy never expected any trouble when her disabled sister, Lily, moved in with her. Their suburban home in Maple Creek Estates had been nothing but peaceful for the past 5 years. The neighborhood had well-kept lawns, friendly neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs, and community barbecues every summer. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could heal and start over. And that's exactly what Lily needed. After 15 years of marriage, her husband had walked out, leaving her to manage her progressive muscular condition on her own. The divorce had been messy and draining, both emotionally and financially. "I just want somewhere quiet where I can figure out what's next," Lily had told Nancy during their late-night phone calls. The sisters had always been close, despite their 7-year age gap. When Nancy offered her spare bedroom, Lily cried with relief. "Just until I get back on my feet." "Well, you know what I mean," she joked, gesturing to her wheelchair. The weeks before Lily's arrival were filled with activity. Nancy rearranged furniture to create wider pathways throughout the house. She installed grab bars in the bathroom and lowered shelves in the kitchen so Lily could reach things easily. The most important modification was the gently sloping wooden ramp that replaced the 3 steps leading to the front door. "Is this going to be a problem with your HOA?" Lily asked as she watched the carpenter put the finishing touches on the ramp. It matched the house perfectly, painted the same warm beige with white trim. Nancy shook her head. "I checked the bylaws. Medical accommodations are protected by federal law. Besides, Mrs. Chen next door has a similar ramp for her mother, and nobody said a word about it." The day Lily moved in was sunny and bright. Nancy decorated the house with welcome banners and filled the fridge with Lily's favorite foods. As they sat on the back patio that evening, sharing a bottle of wine and watching fireflies appear in the growing dusk, Lily seemed truly relaxed for the first time in months. "I think I'm going to be happy here," she said, smiling at her sister. Neither of them noticed the curtains moving in the window of the house across the street, where Patricia Wilson stood watching with narrowed eyes. As the newly elected president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association, Patricia prided herself on maintaining the neighborhood's standards. The ramp that had appeared on Nancy's front porch definitely didn't fit her vision of those standards. Patricia had moved to Maple Creek 3 years ago after retiring early from her corporate job. Without the pressure and deadlines that had structured her days for decades, she'd thrown herself into neighborhood politics with surprising intensity. Most residents tried to avoid catching her attention. "That ramp is an unauthorized structural modification," Patricia muttered to herself, reaching for her notebook where she meticulously documented every perceived rule violation. The previous HOA president had been lenient, in Patricia's opinion. Things were different now that she was in charge. The next morning, as Lily wheeled herself out to the front porch with a cup of coffee, enjoying the simple pleasure of fresh air and sunshine, she noticed a woman in a crisp linen pantsuit marching across the street with purpose in every step. The woman's silver blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she carried a manila folder under her arm like a weapon. Lily didn't know it yet, but this was Patricia Wilson, and she was about to make the sisters' lives a living nightmare. What Patricia didn't realize was that her obsession with control and power would eventually lead to her downfall. The FBI had already been watching the neighborhood for reasons that went far beyond a simple wheelchair ramp. Patricia marched across the street with her manila folder clutched tightly under her arm. Her shoes clicked sharply against the pavement as Lily watched from the porch, coffee mug still warm in her hands. There was something about the woman's determined stride that made Lily's stomach tighten with unease. "Good morning," Lily called out, trying to be neighborly despite her growing discomfort. Patricia barely acknowledged the greeting with a curt nod. "Is the homeowner available?" she asked, her voice clipped and professional. "My sister will be back from her morning run any minute," Lily replied. "Can I help you with something?" Patricia's eyes flicked to the wheelchair ramp and then back to Lily. "I'll wait," she said, checking her watch impatiently. The awkward silence that followed was mercifully broken by Nancy jogging up the sidewalk, her face flushed from exercise. She slowed when she spotted the unfamiliar woman standing on her porch. "Can I help you?" Nancy asked, climbing the ramp and standing protectively near her sister. Patricia straightened her shoulders. "I'm Patricia Wilson, the new president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. She opened her folder and pulled out what looked like a printout of the neighborhood bylaws, highlighted in various neon colors. "I'm here about this unauthorized structural modification to your property." Nancy blinked, momentarily confused. "You mean the ramp?" "Yes. According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our community guidelines, all exterior modifications require prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee." Patricia's finger tapped against a bright yellow highlighted section. "But this is a necessary accommodation for my sister," Nancy explained, gesturing toward Lily. "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects." Patricia cut her off with a dismissive wave. "The ADA doesn't override our HOA covenants that you agreed to when you purchased this property. Rules are rules. You have 7 days to remove it, or you'll face daily fines starting at $50. Lily felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she whispered to Nancy. "You're not causing trouble," Nancy assured her before turning back to Patricia. "This is ridiculous. Mrs. Chen down the street has a ramp for her mother." Patricia's tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Chen's situation is being addressed separately. I'm focusing on your violation today." She pulled out a form and handed it to Nancy. "This is your official notice, 7 days. As Patricia turned to leave, Nancy called after her, "I'm not removing my sister's ramp. You can't legally force me to do this." Patricia paused and looked back, her expression hardening. "Watch me." After Patricia left, Nancy's hands were shaking so badly she could barely close the front door. "What a horrible woman," she muttered. "Maybe we should just take it down," Lily suggested quietly. "I don't want to cause problems." Nancy shook her head firmly. "No way. You need this ramp, and we have every right to have it here. I'm not letting some power-hungry HOA president bully us." The next day, the sisters discovered a bright orange violation sticker plastered across their mailbox. The day after that, they received a formal letter listing 3 additional violations: their garbage can being visible from the street, unapproved flower varieties in the front garden, and a bird feeder hanging from the oak tree. "This is ridiculous," Nancy fumed, tossing the letter onto the kitchen counter. "She's just making things up now." When Lily went to her physical therapy appointment that afternoon, she returned to find Patricia taking photos of their house, zooming in on the ramp with her phone camera. That evening, someone called in a noise complaint, though the sisters had been quietly watching TV. "This isn't random," Nancy said as she peeked through the blinds, watching Patricia talking to another neighbor across the street. "She's targeting us specifically." What the sisters didn't know was that they weren't Patricia's first victims. Behind the perfect lawns and friendly waves of Maple Creek Estates, other residents had been silently suffering under Patricia's reign for months. And somewhere, in an office miles away, a file with Patricia Wilson's name on it was growing thicker by the day. The situation with Patricia quickly went from bad to worse. By the end of the week, Nancy found 5 new violation notices stuffed in their mailbox, each one more ridiculous than the last. According to Patricia, their curtains were the wrong shade of white, their doormat was non-standard, and the bird bath in their backyard created unsanitary conditions. "This is getting out of hand," Nancy said, dropping the latest batch of notices onto the kitchen table. "She's making our lives miserable." Lily looked up from her coffee, dark circles under her eyes showing how poorly she'd been sleeping. "I heard her outside last night. I think she was taking more pictures of the house." Nancy frowned. "At night? That's trespassing." She ran her hands through her hair in frustration. "I'm installing security cameras today. This has gone beyond ridiculous." That afternoon, Nancy set up 4 wireless cameras around their property. She barely finished mounting the last one when Patricia appeared at the edge of their lawn, arms crossed and face pinched with disapproval. "Those cameras are a violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4, Patricia called out. "No recording devices facing public areas." Nancy climbed down from her stepladder. "They're facing my property, Patricia, and they're staying up." "We'll see about that," Patricia replied with a tight smile. "The board meeting is tomorrow night. I suggest you attend to explain all your modifications." The next evening, Nancy and Lily arrived at the community center for the HOA meeting. The room fell awkwardly silent when they entered. About 20 neighbors sat in folding chairs, most avoiding eye contact. Patricia sat at the front with 3 other board members, her smile cold and satisfied. "Ah, the Thompsons have decided to join us," Patricia announced. "How considerate. We've added your violations to the agenda, your item number 7. An older gentleman in the back raised his hand. "I move to discuss the Thompson situation first. They've got a disabled resident. This shouldn't wait." Patricia's smile tightened. "We follow the agenda as written, Mr. Rivera. Rules are rules." For the next hour, they sat through discussions about community garden funding and pool maintenance schedules. Lily whispered to Nancy, "Everyone looks so uncomfortable. What's going on?" Nancy had noticed it too. The tension in the room was thick. Whenever Patricia spoke, people would nod quickly or stare at their laps. No one made eye contact with her for long. Finally, Patricia called their item. Now, regarding the Thompson residents and their multiple violations. Nancy stood up, hands trembling slightly but voice steady. "I've consulted with a disability rights attorney. Our ramp is protected by federal law. The Americans with Disabilities Act supersedes HOA regulations when it comes to necessary accommodations." Patricia's face flushed. "That's your opinion. The board." "The board should know," interrupted a woman sitting near the window, "that my mother has had a similar ramp for 3 years without issue. Until recently." She glared at Patricia. Suddenly, others began speaking up. "My son's therapy dog was approved by the previous board. Now I'm getting fined every week. She threatened to put a line on my house because my trash can was visible for 1 extra day when I was in the hospital." Patricia banged her gavel. "This is out of order. We're discussing the Thompson violations only." Nancy looked around the room in shock. "How many of you have received violation notices since Patricia became president?" Nearly every hand in the room went up. Patricia's face went from red to purple. "This meeting is adjourned." She snatched up her papers and stormed out, the other board members looking confused and uncomfortable. After she left, people gathered around Nancy and Lily, sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation. One neighbor, a quiet man who'd recently moved into the cul-de-sac, listened intently without saying much. He jotted notes in a small notebook. "We need to organize," Nancy told the group. "She can't bully all of us." What no one realized was that Patricia's reign of terror was already under investigation. The cameras Nancy had installed would soon capture evidence that would interest people far beyond their little neighborhood. The small notebook in the quiet neighbor's hand wasn't just for community organizing. It was building a case that would eventually bring the HOA Karen's empire crashing down. The day after the chaotic HOA meeting, Nancy woke up to find her front yard littered with lawn ornaments she'd never seen before. Plastic flamingos, garden gnomes, and a large ceramic frog. A note was taped to her door. "Documented violation of lawn decoration policies. Fines begin immediately." It was unsigned, but Nancy knew exactly who was behind it. "She planted these herself," Nancy fumed, checking the security camera footage. Sure enough, at 5:30 that morning, the cameras had captured Patricia sneaking around their yard, placing the ornaments strategically before hurrying back across the street. "Can we report her for trespassing?" Lily asked, watching the footage over her sister's shoulder. "Absolutely," Nancy replied. "But something tells me the local police might not take an HOA dispute very seriously." That afternoon, their doorbell rang. Nancy opened it to find Mrs. Rivera, the elderly woman from down the street whose husband had spoken up at the meeting. "I saw what she did," Mrs. Rivera said quietly, glancing nervously toward Patricia's house. "She's done similar things to others. Last month, she planted non-approved flowers in the Hendersons' garden, then fined them for it." "Why is everyone so afraid of her?" Nancy asked, inviting the woman inside. Mrs. Rivera lowered her voice even though they were now in the house. "She has connections at City Hall. My husband questioned her about HOA finances last year, and suddenly our property tax assessment went up by 30%. Can't be coincidence." More neighbors began reaching out privately. The Chens brought homemade dumplings and shared that Patricia had tried to fine them for cooking odors until they threatened to file a discrimination complaint. The Patels mentioned that their children were no longer allowed to play in the front yard after Patricia claimed they were disturbing the peace. "She picks her targets carefully," Mr. Chen explained. "Usually newcomers, elderly folks, or families too busy to fight back." But why? Lily asked. What does she get out of making everyone miserable? Control, maybe, Nancy suggested. Or maybe there's something more. The quiet man from the cul-de-sac, who introduced himself as Thomas, showed up the next day with a curious request. I heard about your security cameras, he said. I'm wondering if you could adjust one to include the view of Patricia's driveway. Nancy raised an eyebrow. Why? Thomas hesitated. Let's just say I've noticed some unusual patterns. Expensive deliveries for someone on a retirement income. Late-night visitors who look more like business associates than friends. Nancy wasn't sure what to make of Thomas, but she agreed to angle one camera to capture a wider view. 2 days later, Nancy received an official-looking letter threatening legal action over her invasive surveillance equipment. The letter came from a law firm, but when Nancy called the number, she discovered the firm had never heard of Patricia Wilson or Maple Creek Estates. She's forging legal documents now, Nancy told Lily, shocked at the escalation. That evening, as the sisters were discussing their options, they noticed unusual activity across the street. 3 cars pulled up to Patricia's house, one after another, each visitor carrying folders or briefcases. The meetings lasted exactly 30 minutes each. What is she doing over there? Lily wondered. The next morning, Thomas knocked on their door again, this time looking concerned. I need to tell you something, he said, voice low. I'm not just a new neighbor. I moved here specifically because of Patricia Wilson. Nancy stared at him. What do you mean? I can't give you details yet, but I've been watching her for reasons that go beyond her HOA tactics. Your situation with the ramp was the first time I've seen her directly target someone with a disability, which adds another layer to the investigation. Investigation? Lily asked, eyes widening. Who are you? Thomas glanced over his shoulder before answering. Someone who's been building a case for months, and what I saw on your security footage last night might be the missing piece. As he walked away, Nancy turned to Lily with a mixture of hope and confusion. I think our HOA Karen has been doing a lot more than just harassing neighbors over ramps and garden gnomes. What the sisters didn't realize was that Patricia's empire was built on far more serious crimes than HOA violations, and the walls were beginning to close in around her. The mysterious Thomas became a regular visitor at Nancy and Lily's home in the weeks that followed. He always appeared when Patricia was out, quietly knocking on their back door rather than using the front entrance. Today, he sat at their kitchen table reviewing the growing collection of violation notices and security footage. She's getting more aggressive, Nancy said, pushing a new stack of papers toward him. Yesterday, she actually blocked our driveway with her car when Lily needed to get to her doctor's appointment. Thomas's expression darkened. Did you record it? Better than that. Lily wheeled herself to the laptop and pulled up a video. I started recording on my phone as soon as she approached the car. The footage showed Patricia standing beside her expensive sedan, which was parked diagonally across the sisters' driveway. The HOA is conducting a driveway inspection today, Patricia said with a smirk. You'll need to postpone your outing. I have a medical appointment. Lily's voice came through clearly on the recording. You can't legally block me in. Patricia's face twisted with contempt. Medical appointment? Is that what you call it? Everyone knows you're faking this whole disability thing for attention. Thomas whispered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. This crosses a new line, he said, pulling out his phone and sending the video to someone. Disability harassment is a federal offense when it prevents access to medical care. Who exactly are you sending that to? Nancy asked, her suspicion finally bubbling over. You keep saying you're investigating her, but you never explain why or who you're working with. Thomas sighed, looking between the two sisters. I can't tell you everything yet, but I can tell you that Patricia Wilson isn't just an HOA tyrant. Based on financial records and witness statements, we believe she's running several schemes through the Homeowners Association. What kind of schemes? Lily asked. Embezzlement for one. The HOA fees in this neighborhood are unusually high, but the services provided keep decreasing. Where's that money going? And then there's the pattern of property lines and foreclosures since she took over. 8 homes in this neighborhood have been sold at below market rates in the past year, all to shell companies that traced back to business associates of Patricia's. Nancy's jaw dropped. She's forcing people out of their homes. Thomas nodded grimly. She targets vulnerable homeowners, drowns them in violation fees they can't pay, then arranges for her partners to buy the properties cheap when they're forced to sell. A knock at the front door made them all freeze. Thomas quickly gathered his notes, disappearing into the back bedroom as Nancy went to answer it. She found Mrs. Chen on the doorstep, visibly shaking. "Nancy, I need help," the older woman whispered. "Patricia just told me the board is revoking approval for my mother's ramp. They're sending someone to remove it tomorrow morning." "She can't do that," Nancy exclaimed. "She says as treasurer she's reviewed the financial records and found I'm 3 months behind on HOA fees, which gives them the right to revoke accommodations." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not behind. I have all my receipts and bank statements showing payments." Nancy invited her inside, and Thomas emerged from the back room, his professional demeanor suddenly much more evident. "Mrs. Chen, do you have copies of those payment records?" he asked. She nodded, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I bring them everywhere now. Patricia has claimed I didn't pay before." Thomas reviewed the documents carefully, taking photos with his phone. "This is exactly what we needed," he said quietly. "Evidence of financial fraud." That evening, after Mrs. Chen and Thomas had left, Nancy noticed a car parked down the street. The same car had been there yesterday and the day before. "I think we're being watched," she told Lily. "But I'm not sure if it's Patricia's people or Thomas." Lily wheeled herself to the window. "Either way, something big is about to happen. Look, Thomas is talking to whoever's in that car." As they watched, Thomas handed something through the window. It looked like a flash drive. The car pulled away, and Thomas walked back toward his house with purpose in his stride. "Tomorrow," Nancy said, "I think we'll finally find out who Thomas really is." What the sisters didn't know was that the quiet investigation into Patricia Wilson had just escalated to a level that would shock the entire neighborhood. The next morning, Nancy woke to the sound of angry voices outside. She rushed to the window to see several neighbors gathered around Mrs. Chen's house across the street. 2 men in work overalls were attempting to dismantle her mother's wheelchair ramp, while Mrs. Chen stood in front of it, arms outstretched to block them. "They're actually doing it," Nancy gasped, quickly throwing on clothes. "Lily, stay here and call Thomas. Tell him what's happening." Nancy ran outside, joining the small crowd that had formed. Patricia stood off to the side, arms crossed and a satisfied smile on her face as she supervised the workers. "You can't do this." Mrs. Chen was crying, her elderly mother watching fearfully from the window. "This ramp is necessary for my mother's medical needs." "Your account is delinquent," Patricia replied loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The HOA has every right to remove unauthorized structures when homeowners violate their financial obligations." Nancy pushed through the crowd. "She's not delinquent. She showed us her payment records yesterday. You're lying, Patricia." Patricia's face flushed with anger. "This is none of your business. Go back to your own violations." More neighbors began to arrive, drawn by the commotion. Mr. Rivera stepped forward with his phone. "I'm recording this. What you're doing is illegal, Patricia." "Record all you want," Patricia snapped. "As HOA president and treasurer, I have full documentation of her missed payments." Funny thing about documentation, came a calm voice from behind the crowd. Everyone turned to see Thomas walking toward them, accompanied by 2 people in business attire. It works both ways. Thomas approached Patricia, his demeanor completely changed. Gone was the quiet, unassuming neighbor. In his place stood someone with clear authority. "Mrs. Wilson, I think it's time we had a conversation about HOA financial records." Patricia took a step back. "Who are these people? This is private property and HOA business." Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a badge. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Reynolds with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. These are my colleagues, Agents Clark and Washington. We've been investigating financial irregularities in the Maple Creek HOA for the past 6 months." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Patricia's face went from red to ghostly white. "That's ridiculous," she stammered. "There are no irregularities. I keep meticulous records." "Yes, you do," Agent Clark said, "including the real records you keep on your home computer showing where the missing $200,000 in HOA fees actually went." Mrs. Chen gasped. $200,000? Agent Washington nodded. We have a warrant to search your home and seize your electronic devices, Mrs. Wilson. We also have evidence of your harassment campaigns against homeowners, particularly those with disabilities or ethnic backgrounds different from your own. Nancy stepped forward. She's been targeting my sister because of her wheelchair ramp. She even blocked her from getting to a doctor's appointment. We know, Thomas said. Your security footage has been very helpful in building our case. Patricia backed away, looking around wildly. This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong. I'm enforcing the rules. The rules don't include creating fake violation notices, trespassing on private property, falsifying legal documents, or embezzling HOA funds, Thomas replied calmly. Workers, please stop dismantling that ramp immediately. Mrs. Chen will need your payment records as evidence. The neighbors watched in shocked silence as the two agents approached Patricia with a warrant. The HOA board members who had arrived looked utterly bewildered. Did anyone know about this? One board member asked. About the missing money? Patricia kept the financial records to herself, another replied. She said it was simpler that way. As Patricia was escorted to an unmarked car, she locked eyes with Nancy. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll regret this. But Nancy could see the fear behind Patricia's anger. The HOA Karen's reign of terror was crumbling before their eyes. Back at home, Lily watched from the window as Thomas, now revealed as FBI Agent Reynolds, spoke with the crowd of neighbors. So that's why he was so interested in our security footage, she said when Nancy returned. He was building a case all along. Nancy nodded. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning. From what the agents were saying, there's a lot more to uncover about what Patricia's been doing. The weeks following Patricia's dramatic confrontation with the FBI were a whirlwind for the entire neighborhood. Maple Creek Estates buzzed with activity as federal agents combed through years of HOA records. Neighbors who had suffered in silence now spoke freely, sharing stories of intimidation and harassment that painted a picture of Patricia's reign of terror. Nancy and Lily found themselves at the center of it all. Their living room became an unofficial meeting place where Agent Reynolds, still known as Thomas to most, would update residents on the investigation. The more we dig, the worse it gets, Thomas told the gathered neighbors one evening. Patricia wasn't just stealing HOA fees. She was running a complex scheme targeting vulnerable homeowners. Mrs. Rivera nodded sadly. She kept raising our fees, claiming it was for community improvements that never happened. When people couldn't pay, the fines piled up. Exactly, Thomas confirmed. Then she used her position to place liens on properties, forcing people into foreclosure. Her business partners would swoop in, buy the homes at rock-bottom prices, and flip them for massive profits. Patricia got a cut of every deal. That explains all those house sales last year, Mr. Chen said. 4 families on my street alone, all elderly or single parents who couldn't fight back. Lily, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. So my disability wasn't really the issue, was it? She targeted us because she thought we'd be easy to push out. Thomas nodded grimly. Your ramp was just an excuse. She saw your situation and classified you as vulnerable. What she didn't count on was your sister's determination, or those security cameras. The FBI's search of Patricia's home had uncovered a treasure trove of evidence. Meticulous records of her schemes, forged documents, and even a list ranking neighborhood residents by how easily they could be intimidated. Nancy and Lily had been marked as high-priority targets, with notes about using Lily's disability as leverage. She kept track of everything, Thomas explained. It's like she was proud of what she was doing. The investigation expanded beyond Maple Creek when agents discovered Patricia had run similar schemes in 2 previous neighborhoods. The total amount stolen exceeded $500,000, affecting dozens of families over the past decade. 3 months after the initial arrest, the community gathered at the local courthouse for Patricia's arraignment. She faced 27 charges including fraud, embezzlement, falsifying documents, and civil rights violations. Nancy and Lily sat in the front row, watching as Patricia entered in handcuffs, but designer clothes replaced by a standard jumpsuit. She looked smaller somehow, her confident swagger gone. When she spotted the sisters, she quickly looked away. All rise, called the bailiff as the judge entered. Outside the courthouse afterward, reporters gathered around the former victims. Nancy found herself standing before microphones, speaking for those who had suffered silently for so long. "This case isn't just about stolen money," she said. "It's about abuse of power." Patricia used the HOA to target people she saw as weak, the elderly, single parents, and people with disabilities like my sister. She counted on our silence and isolation. What she didn't count on was our community coming together. The aftermath brought healing to Maple Creek Estates. A completely new HOA board was elected, with transparency rules and term limits. Mrs. Chen became the new president, with Mr. Rivera as treasurer. Their first official act was to create a neighborhood accessibility committee, chaired by Lily, to ensure accommodations for residents with disabilities. 6 months after Patricia's arrest, the sisters hosted a block party to celebrate the installation of wheelchair ramps at the community center and pool. Thomas, now permanently assigned to white-collar crime in their district, stopped by with good news. Patricia took a plea deal, he told them quietly. 15 years, no chance of early release. She's also required to make full restitution to everyone she harmed. As the sun set over their neighborhood that evening, Lily looked around at the transformed community. Children played freely on lawns that once couldn't have toys visible. Gardens bloomed with diverse flowers once forbidden by strict rules. Neighbors chatted across property lines without fear of unauthorized gathering cetaceans. "You know what's amazing?" Lily said to Nancy as they watched their neighbors enjoy the party. "Patricia thought my disability made me weak, a perfect target. But in the end, it was the very thing that brought her down and made our community stronger." Nancy smiled, squeezing her sister's shoulder. "That wheelchair ramp didn't just give you access to our house. It gave all of us a path to justice."